A wooden hull cracks against black water. Waves crash over the bow, heavy and freezing against the skin, filling the deck faster than it can be bailed, viewing the ocean as a vacation destination, a place to sail, to swim, to take photographs at sunset. But the Greek word Mark chooses for be still is pephimoso. It literally means be muzzled. It is the exact same verb Jesus uses in Mark chapter 1, when he commands a demonic spirit to shut its mouth and leave a possessed man. He speaks to the ocean with the precise vocabulary he uses to address a demon. He is not just adjusting a barometric pressure system. He is exorcising the water. The text says, "The wind ceased, and there was a great calm. The water goes flat like glass. The monster hears the voice of the one who drew the shorelines in the beginning, and it instantly drops to the floor, muzzled and chained. The disciples drop their bailing buckets. They stare at the unmoving water. And then they stare at the man standing in the stern. Mark notes that they were terrified during the storm. But now, in the silence, they are filled with an entirely different kind of dread. They ask each other, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" They know exactly who tells the sea what to do. They know exactly who set the bars and the doors. But this absolute mastery over the deep does not stay in the ancient past, because centuries later, we would try to explain away the chaos, only to find the monster is still waiting in the dark. So, when we open the scriptures, we project our tamed, modern understanding of water onto an ancient, terrified world. The monster was muzzled in Galilee, but the chaos did not stay in the first century. You do not sail the Mediterranean. You drive on paved roads. You sleep in a temperature-controlled room. You check the weather on a glowing glass screen. You build firewalls and insurance policies and retirement accounts. You think the water is tamed, but the monster does not need an ocean to reach you. The biblical image of the sea is the sudden, uncontainable chaos of the human experience. It is the terrifying unpredictability of a broken world. It is the things you cannot control. No matter how thick you build your walls or how carefully you plan your days, it is the doctor walking into a sterile room with a heavy look in his eye. It is the midnight phone call that makes your blood run cold. It is the sudden, violent collapse of a bank account. It is the betrayal that cracks the foundation of your home. The water rises. The floorboards vanish. You are drowning in a dry room, gasping for air, while the machinery of your carefully constructed life sinks around you. You try to bail the water. You try to work harder. You try to outsmart the storm. You try to reason with the panic. The chaos is not a schedule malfunction. It is the ancient void trying to unmake your life. We assume the sea is just a backdrop. But if you look closer at the vocabulary the ancient Hebrew writers use, and this is where the Jesus of the Gospels completely shatters our expectations. When your life floods, you beg God for a boat. You beg him for a bridge. You beg him to airlift you out of the terror and drop you on solid ground. But he does something completely counterintuitive. He walks on the water. In Matthew chapter 14, Jesus does not calm the storm from the shoreline. He steps directly onto the whitecaps. He walks on the foaming, churning surface of the deep in the middle of the night. He places his bare feet on the very element that represents death, anti-creation, and uncontrollable terror. He does not throw a life jacket from a safe distance. He steps directly onto the surface of your panic. He proves that the thing threatening to swallow you is entirely underneath his feet. The chaos that is currently over your head is firmly under his sandals. But managing the chaos is only a temporary solution. Walking on the water is a rescue, but it is not a final cure. The ultimate victory requires something far more permanent than a muzzled storm or a rescued disciple. To see how the cosmic war actually ends, you have to leave the Sea of Galilee and look at the terrifying beast rising from the foam on a rocky island in the Aegean, at the way the prophets describe the ocean. At the final terrifying promise in the book of Revelation, you start to see salt spray burns the eyes of an old man on a prison island. He sits on the jagged rocks of Patmos, a volcanic landmass in the Aegean, staring out at the crashing surf. He is isolated. He is cut off from the churches he loves by miles of dark. Uncrossable water. The Roman Empire placed him here because the sea is a highly effective cage. It is a wall of deep water designed to silence a prophet. But as he stares at the churning Mediterranean, the sky tears open and the vision begins. In Revelation chapter 13, John describes a nightmare unfolding on the shoreline. And I saw a beast rising out of the sea, with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on its horns and blasphemous names on its heads. To a modern reader, this sounds like a bizarre fantasy movie. But to a first-century Hebrew mind immersed in the Old Testament scriptures, the geographical origin of this monster is the most important detail in the entire vision. The beast does not descend from the clouds. It does not crawl out of a desert cave. It rises out of the water. The beast is not a new enemy. It is the ancient chaos wearing a crown. In apocalyptic Jewish literature, the sea is the ultimate womb of evil, something the geographical reading completely misses. The sea is not a location. It is a hostile, breathing enemy. Every oppressive human empire, whether it was Egypt, Babylon, or the Rome that currently holds John captive on this rock, is depicted as a leviathan emerging from the untamed abyss. When the prophet Daniel had his visions centuries earlier, he also stood on the shore as the winds of heaven stirred up the great sea, and he watched 4 terrifying beasts come up out of the foaming surf. The pattern is unbreakable. These empires are the political manifestation of Genesis 1 to 2. They are the dark, unformed Tehom, taking physical shape. They thrive on violence. They feed on disorder. And they consume human flourishing, just as the freezing ocean consumes a sinking ship. The sea is not just the salt water trapping John on an island. It is the source code of the empire, trying to crush the people of God. As long as the sea exists, the threat remains. Muzzling the storm is a temporary relief. Walking on the waves is a beautiful rescue. But as long as the abyss is still there, another beast can always rise from its depths. The chaos can always return, to finally end the cosmic war. In the ancient Near Eastern imagination, the ocean was the ultimate symbol of anti-creation. It was the dark, untamed domain of chaos. The creator has to do something far more radical than simply telling the water where to stop. John looks past the beast. He looks past the fall of Rome. He looks all the way to the final page of the human story. In Revelation chapter 21, verse 1, he sees a new heaven and a new earth. The old order has fractured. The new city is descending. And then, almost as an afterthought, John drops a short phrase that completely rewrites the architecture of the cosmos. And the sea was no more. Most modern readers stumble over this verse. We love the ocean. We love the smell of salt air. We love the sound of crashing surf. We imagine a restored earth and wonder why the creator would pave over the beach. But John is not writing a travel brochure. He is writing an apocalypse. The disappearance of the sea is not a landscaping decision. It is a cosmic eviction notice. Remember the ancient Hebrew imagination. The sea is the Tehom. It is the dark, freezing abyss of Genesis 1. It is the unformed chaos that swallows prophets and sinks fishing boats. It is the birthplace of the multi-headed beast of empire. It is the physical wall of salt water currently trapping an old man on a prison island, separating him from the people he loves. In the new creation, God does not just put the monster back on a leash. He completely drains the abyss that constantly threatened to unmake the order God established. It swallowed ships. It consumed coastlines. It hid leviathans in its crushing depths. No more storms to shatter the fleets. No more leviathans waiting in the crushing dark. No more barriers keeping the exiled apart from their homes. The chaos is entirely eradicated. In Genesis 1, God managed the chaos. He set bars and doors. He drew shorelines in the wet mud to keep the water back. In Revelation 21, God eliminates the chaos entirely. The boundary is no longer needed. The cage is dismantled. The enemy is gone. The universe is finally safe. But this promise is not just a theological concept for the end of time. It is a reality that reaches backward. Straight into the dark water you are treading right now. The dark void churned before time began, and a boundary was drawn in the wet mud. The Red Sea rose up like a black wall, and a fugitive nation walked through the belly of the monster. The Mediterranean swallowed a rebel prophet, and the abyss vomited him back onto the dry shore. The Galilean storm tried to sink a fishing boat, and the water was muzzled until it went flat like glass. The midnight waves foamed in the dark, and a carpenter walked across them with bare feet. The real question of these aquatic stories isn't, will they drown? It's this: who has the authority to put the monster on a leash? The Aegean surf birthed a multi-headed beast, and the empire it built was ultimately broken. The cosmic ocean threatened the new creation, and the creator drained it completely dry. Same enemy, same conqueror, but maybe the part that stays with me most is the cushion in the stern of the boat. The image of the carpenter sleeping while the commercial fishermen are screaming. Not because he doesn't care that they are perishing, but because he knows exactly who set the bars and the doors. The chaos is terrifying to the men with the bailing buckets, but it is completely unthreatening to the one who drew the shorelines. If you are in a season where the water is rising in your own life, where the chaos feels uncontainable and the machinery of your carefully constructed plans is sinking around you, you do not need to outsmart the storm. The chaos is not an independent kingdom. It is a servant taking orders. And the one who told the proud waves where to stop is the same one, standing on the deck of your panic right now. And may the God who placed his bare feet on the foaming surface of the deep walk with you, through yours, and bring you out onto dry ground, until the day the sea is finally no more. Because if you read these texts without understanding the ancient dread of the deep, you will miss the cosmic war playing out beneath the surface of the text. You will think Jesus is just calming a weather pattern, when he is actually doing something far more violent. He is subjugating a rebel force. The men gripping the ropes are not tourists. They are commercial fishermen who have spent their entire lives on this lake. The place to start is not in a Galilean fishing boat. To feel the weight of this story, you have to go back to the very first page of the Bible. You have to step into the dark. Silent void before time even had a name. The opening lines of Genesis do not describe a quiet, empty stage waiting for actors. When the modern, Western mind tries to picture the state of the universe before creation, we tend to imagine a vacuum. We picture outer space, a dark, silent, infinite emptiness, like a blank canvas waiting for the first stroke of paint. We think of nothingness as an absence of material, but the ancient Hebrew imagination did not equate nothingness with an empty room. They equated nothingness with a violent, freezing, uncontainable ocean. The canvas was not blank. It was drowning. Genesis chapter 1. Verse 2 sets the scene for the entire biblical drama with a terrifying image. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. The text uses a rhyming Hebrew phrase, men who know the smell of a localized squall and the changing temperature of the night wind. And right now, they are screaming to describe this pre-creation reality: tohu wabohu, wild and waste, chaos and confusion. It is a state of absolute disorder, represented by a black, churning surface of water with no shorelines to hold it back, no light to pierce its depths, and no solid ground to stand upon. Creation is not a magic trick. It is a conquest. God does not begin the biblical story by speaking planets into a peaceful vacuum. He begins by speaking boundaries into a storm. He separates the waters above from the waters below, carving out a pocket of breathable air and dry ground in the middle of a hostile, crushing environment. He creates limits. He forces the water to retreat, exposing the dry land, locking the chaos behind borders of rock and sand. The shoreline is not a geological accident. It is a divine decree. It is the visible evidence of God drawing a line in the wet sand and telling the chaos exactly how far it is allowed to reach. To the original readers of this text, living in a brutal world where a sudden squall on the Mediterranean could wipe out a fishing fleet in minutes, This was a profoundly comforting theological statement. The deep that threatened to swallow their ships and flood their crops. This terror is not an isolated incident. Rain falls for 40 days until the mountains disappear and the earth is erased. Was not an equal rival to Yahweh. It was a subdued element, resting firmly under the shadow of his hovering presence. God is the one who steps onto the unformed water and brings structure out of anarchy. The water is allowed to exist, but it is kept on a leash. But the order established in Genesis 1 is not permanent by default. The boundary holding the crushing weight of the waters back is tethered to human obedience. And when the earth fills with violence, the Creator decides to lift the borders. The chaos is invited back in. The mud sucks at their sandals. Women clutch crying infants. The wind screams out of the east, carrying the metallic clash of Pharaoh's approaching chariots. Behind them is an empire of whips and brickmaking. In front of them is a wall of black, churning water. The Red Sea is not offering a way out. It is offering a grave. They are trapped. There are no boats. There is no bridge. The water is a death sentence. Moses steps forward. He raises a piece of dry wood. The wind tears the water apart. Water does not behave this way. It does not stack like stone. It does not hold its breath. A fugitive nation stands on a muddy shoreline, trapped between the bronze armor of Pharaoh's chariots and a wall of impossible, churning surf. But the chaos recognizes the authority of the one who drew the shorelines. The sea splits. The ground dries instantly. 2 million fugitives walk through the belly of the monster without getting their feet wet. The water stands at attention on their right and their left. A towering, freezing cliff of suspended chaos. This is not just an escape route. It is a divine humiliation. God is showing Israel that the terrifying abyss is his footstool. He tells it to move, and it moves. He tells it to collapse on the Egyptian armor, and it collapses. Centuries pass. A rebel prophet buys a ticket on a cargo ship heading for Tarshish. He is running from the voice of Yahweh. He steps onto the wooden deck and sails into the Mediterranean. The sky darkens. The wood groans. The sea rises up to swallow the ship. The pagan sailors hurl their cargo into the foam, screaming to their gods. But the storm does not care about their prayers. The sea is hungry. Jonah knows the truth. The storm is not a random weather event. It is a bloodhound. He tells them to throw him over the rail. They lift him. They drop him into the abyss. He hits the water. He sinks. A prophet plunges into the Mediterranean, sinking down to the roots of the mountains where seaweed wraps around his head. The pressure crushes his chest. Seaweed wraps around his throat. The current drags him down to the roots of the mountains. He hits the very bottom of the world. But the monster does not get to digest its prey. God commands a creature of the deep. The fish obeys. The chaos vomits the prophet onto the dry sand of a new shoreline. He is alive. The deep is not an independent kingdom. It is a servant taking orders. Moses splits it. Jonah survives it. The pattern is obvious across the Old Testament. But the terrifying nature of this enemy is only fully exposed when you look at the actual vocabulary the prophets used to describe it. You have to look at the ancient Hebrew hiding beneath your English Bible. When you read Genesis chapter 1, verse 2 inches, English, the translation is usually straightforward. Darkness was over the face of the deep, but the original audience was not reading English. And they were not reading a science textbook. They were reading a theological declaration written in a culture surrounded by terrifying myths about the ocean. The word translated the deep is the Hebrew Tehom. In the ancient Near East, the cultures surrounding Israel told stories of a primordial saltwater dragon named Tiamat, a chaos monster who had to be violently slaughtered. An exiled apostle sits on the rocky coast of Patmos, staring at the Aegean, and writes a prophecy about a multi-headed beast rising out of the foam by a warrior god before the world could be built. The Hebrew word Tehom shares a linguistic root with Tiamat, but the biblical author does something brilliant. He strips the abyss of its divine status. In Genesis, the deep is not a rival god with a name. It is simply raw, unformed chaos, resting firmly under the shadow of Yahweh's hovering spirit. But the wildness, the untamed nature of Tehom, remains deeply embedded in the Hebrew imagination. And then there is the word for the sea itself, the Hebrew yam, to Israel's neighbors, the Canaanites. Yam was not just a body of salt water. Yam was the literal god of the sea, a multi-headed dragon of chaos who constantly battled the other gods for supremacy. When the Hebrew writers use the word yam, they are deliberately leaning into this cultural dread. They use the vocabulary of a monster to describe the water. Look at Job chapter 38. Starting in verse 8, God is speaking out of a violent storm, reminding Job of how the architecture of the universe was actually laid down. And he describes the creation of the ocean in terrifying, martial terms. He asks Job, "Who shut in the sea with doors when it burst out from the womb? When I prescribed limits for it and set bars and doors, and said, 'Thus far shall you come, and no farther, and here shall your proud waves be stayed?'" If seeing the text like this, peeling back the English translations to reveal the ancient cosmic war, same element, again and again. Most people read the Bible and assume the sea is just geography, a setting for the plot. Hiding underneath is stirring up questions you've never considered. You're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So God speaks to the ocean like a warden speaking to a prisoner. He does not just place the water in a basin. He locks it behind bars. He commands its proud waves to halt. The text carries the image of a hostile entity constantly pushing against its cage, waiting for a moment of weakness to break out and unmake the world. That route changes everything. The sea is not a neutral geographical feature. It is the lingering symptom of anti-creation. But the ultimate showdown with this enemy does not happen in the poetry of the Old Testament. The true confrontation happens centuries later, in the pitch black of a Galilean night. With a carpenter sleeping on a cushion, the sun drops behind the hills surrounding the Sea of Galilee, trapping the heat in the basin. A cold front sweeps down from Mount Hermon, colliding with the warm air over the water. The barometric pressure collapses. The wind hits the lake like a physical fist. Waves crash over the wooden gunwales. The boat is sinking, a convenient body of water to cross, to fish in, to sink in. We read these stories with modern minds. The men on board are not amateurs. Several of them make their living on this exact body of water, navigating its currents, and reading its weather patterns every single day of their lives. But right now, the water is blinding them, and panic is gripping their throats. Because, in their ancient framework, this is not merely a meteorological event. The bars have broken. The chaos is loose. The monster has come to the surface to drag them down into the dark. And, in the stern of the sinking boat, covered by the freezing spray, a carpenter from Nazareth is sleeping on a cushion. He is not disturbed by the noise. He is not threatened by the deep. He is resting in the exact posture of Yahweh, hovering over the formless void in Genesis, completely unbothered, entirely sovereign over the chaos. The fishermen shake him awake, screaming over the roar of the wind, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" Jesus stands up on the violently pitching deck. He does not panic. He does not plead with heaven to send a rescue party. He looks directly at the churning, hostile element that the ancient world feared more than armies. And he issues a command. In Mark chapter 4, verse 39, the English translation says, "He rebuked the wind and said to the sea, 'Peace, be still.'"